The jury will disregard my interruption of Nick Burns. I apologize. I'm sorry. I confused myself with that 7 o'clock before. So a reminder of where we are. We are halfway through the opening round of this Intelligence Squared U.S. debate. I'm John Donvan. We have 4 debaters, 2 teams of 2, fighting it out over this motion: the U.S. has no dog in the fight in Syria. You've heard the first 2 debaters, and now on to the third. Speaking in support of the motion that the U.S. has no dog in the fight in Syria, I want to introduce Richard Falkenrath. He is a principal with the Chertoff Group, an adjunct senior fellow for counterterrorism and homeland security at the Council on Foreign Relations, former deputy homeland security advisor. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Falkenrath.
Thank you, John. I must just start by saying this is an immensely difficult and tragic problem, and it's very hard to take clear positions when something is so difficult and hard to solve. I will say, however, that there are some things that divide the 2 sides of the debate. And one, as my colleague Graham said, is really what it means to have a dog in the fight. And we stand for a view which says it means you have a vital national interest at stake, which makes it so compelling that you lead and do whatever is necessary to make sure that your vital interests are protected. And we don't think that exists in Syria. Graham made the case in summary for us. There are many things that we are doing as a country, that we could do, that we should do. We heard some of those from Nick. We may hear some more from Nigel. But the real question before us is the interest engaged in Syria so vital that we must lead and be centrally involved and possibly intervene militarily to remove Assad from power? And we think the answer to that, unfortunately, is no. Graham made the argument in summary. I want to elaborate it in 3 ways. First, to give you a little bit of ground truth about this conflict. Second, talk about chemical weapons. And third, the issue of supplying light arms. On the ground truth and the conflict, this is not a simple conflict of good versus evil, though Assad certainly is evil, and it is not a single conflict. This is many different conflicts. And frankly, a fatal flaw in Nick and Nigel's position here is there is no opposition for us to support. You'd think that if you had a dog in the fight, you could at least have a name for the dog on the other side, but it's not good enough to say the Syrian people or the Syrian opposition, because the fact is there is no unified opposition and there is no connection between the mostly exile-based political leadership and the fighters on the ground. We're so draconian on time, I can't really go through all the different factions of Syrian fighters and political entities at the moment, but there's the Syrian Free Army, the Syrian Liberation Front, the Syrian Islamic Front, the Al-Nusra Front, various Kurdish groups, independent groups, all of whom are in fact umbrella groups of smaller numbers of fighters out there in the field running their own operations. And in that context, there are also organizers, the National Coalition, who are mostly outside of the country, not connected to the fighters on the inside and not able to dictate what happens on the ground. And so this is a real problem. If you want to have a dog in the fight, to not have the slightest idea who it is and to hope that it will come together. And in fact, the most effective and vicious and aggressive fighters in this conflict are ones with whom we would never side. The last one I mentioned was the Al-Nusra Front. This is a wing of Al-Qaeda. It has sworn allegiance to Ayman Zawahiri. So yes, we really have 2 dilemmas in Syria. We've got Assad aligned with Hezbollah, a Shiite extremist terrorist group, and the most effective and operationally active opposition group being one who is completely anathema to us, to the point that we've designated them a foreign terrorist organization. So how can you have a dog in the fight when you can't even identify the dog? Second, on chemical weapons, Assad has a massive chemical weapons arsenal, comprised primarily of nerve gas sarin, VX, and mustard gas. Can't go into the details of what it is and where it is. It's not in a condition that can be easily and quickly used, but it is very dangerous. One of the dilemmas we face here is that it is currently controlled by the Assad regime and the Alawite sect. And we do have maybe a vital interest, certainly a very strong interest in ensuring these weapons are not transferred to Hezbollah, and they are not used against Israel, Turkey, our allies in the Gulf, our own forces. And unfortunately, this is actually a sort of restraint on our power. Most of the more aggressive forms of intervention and tipping the military balance in favor of the rebels will lead, at least temporarily, to a higher risk of loss of control of the chemical weapons. We cannot forget that. Finally, I want to say something about what I'd call the moral hazard of half measures. There's an unfortunate leitmotif in American foreign policy, which is every so often we give support and comfort to groups which wish to rise up against an autocrat, and then we get cold feet and leave them dangling. And we did that in Hungary in 1956. We did it in the Bay of Pigs in 61, in Prague in 1968, in southern Iraq in 1991. And we need to be very careful about small half measures in steps which really have no prospect of success, but do make us complicit in the violent outcome which we really cannot control and cannot dictate. And so for that reason, it strikes me as that, yes, of course, we should stay involved and engaged diplomatically and politically. There's room for that. But to begin a process of arming a number of rebel groups whom we can't even control and don't know and frankly don't trust, I think is a very dangerous first step, since we really are not ready to go the distance. And in fact, very few people, and certainly none of them on this panel, I think, are truly ready to go the distance, which, by the way, we all would be if it were a vital national interest. And that's the essence of the problem here. We want to make it better, but it really is not so vital to allow us to be ready to do everything it takes to get the outcome that would be better for us and the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard Falkenrath.